Welcome to The Journos on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Peter Martin, and joining me today, Hugh McDonald, Gordon Parks and Alison McConnell. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button and come and join the football family. We're delighted with your support, especially for The Journos. Lots of people giving us great feedback over the course of the season, and there's many more to come before we get to the end of May. So, with lots to talk about, including things closer to home and a little further afield, let's get into the meat and bones of the fallout still of an Old Firm game. You can always tell when it's a fiery one and people start complaining about stupidities. I might be preempting it, you might tell me otherwise, but Hugh, you and I are well aware of a great movie called All the President's Men, where it was Watergate, but this one is skooshgate. And I'm not sure who's going to play Václav Cerny in the movie. It could be Robert De Niro with a shaved head from Taxi Driver.
John Malkovich.
Very good shout. John Malkovich can play Václav Cerny. But skooshgate is, and I think the great thing was from the pictures is one of the Celtic fans saying, I'm the victim here of water going all over the place. But really, where are we going, Hugh?
I mean, it's obvious he shouldn't have done it. Right? It was daft.
Funny but daft?
It all depends which thing you're going to say. If you're the one watching the water getting scooshed, it's probably hilarious. If you're getting it all over you after just losing, been supporting a team that's just lost the game, probably less so, yes. I would have said. But daft as well, because we know in these situations that the temperature is rising, and you shouldn't do anything to escalate that any further, I believe. Yeah. But I don't think it was in any way sort of heavily malicious or worthy of intervention by my learned friends.
Yes. Well, the other thing about it, which is great, I don't know about you, but the image I've got is the guy, the chief from Scott Squad, sitting down and going, right, let's come up with a reply here. Here's the press release. We're investigating it. You know, while they're all howling with laughter in the room. Partsy, you're looking reflective on this. Is there a serious line to it?
Just another chapter of a Celtic Rangers game where they managed to find something out of the ordinary. Of course it was, hijinks in a moment of euphoria, right? I get it. Overreaction, of course there is. Will it go anywhere? I don't think so. Should it go anywhere? Definitely not. It's just another creation chapter. People getting upset about very little. How can you? I mean, skooshgate will be remembered in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, and it'll be laughed at. I'll tell you what
it will be remembered in: the after-dinner circuit when Václav Cerny eventually starts sitting down with one of his favoured hosts, and they go on the tour. You know, and then they talk about skooshgate. Much the same now as I reflect on it as probably Ali McCoist and Neil Lennon reflect on the story of. But again, if anything, it highlights the absurdity of, you know, had the Ali McCoist and Neil Lennon incident happened between Hearts and Hibs, there wouldn't have been calls for a new law, there wouldn't have been government intervention, nobody would have given two flying. Yeah, but exactly, nobody would have given two hoots.
No, of course not. It's just the nature of that game, the profile of it, surrounded by cameras, it gets headlines. It's also an international week, so it's really quiet. So there are all sorts of reasons why we are oxygenating this story. But I think, I just think it's so puerile. It's unbelievable. It's like something that happens in primary school. It's why we stop games night in my house sometimes at weekends for moments such as this. But it's just utter. Puerile. It's just so.
It shows you
childish.
Though that to caution against stepping it out with the boundary, right? Because the slightest thing is blown right up in post.
I think football fans could probably do indulging in some therapy. You know, it's like the transference here. What you're really angry about is the fact your team's been rotten. You've just conceded a last-minute goal, and here's somebody saying.
Did you see the fury though in the faces of some of those fans?
The victims.
The victims, right?
Yeah.
They were probably privately delighted to a degree that they were caught up in this and they had something. Their team's getting beat. It's a wee kind of crutch to hang on to, a grievance that they could probably magnify. And that's probably where we are at the moment.
The other good thing that did come out of it, though, Hugh, excuse me, and this is something that I think is indicative of capitalism, is there was a guy quickly managed to get mugs quickly, out there with the skoosh, and it's on the cup, and you can
Selling water bottles.
Yeah, but there's the cup as well with the skoosh and Cerny walking over in cartoon form, and I thought to myself, great, he's making a few quid out of it. Although, listen, I'm sure there are some Celtic fans, absolutely going berserk at me for taking that attitude to it. But if it was on the other foot, have a long hard look at yourself on it.
Brian Matthews, Brian Matthews? He was starring that reality TV programme Glow.
Yes, I know. Yeah,
Well-known Rangers fan.
Yes.
Now he's put a thing in one of the group chats today, written by a Celtic fan, just making light of it and making fun of it, and it's very funny. And that approach, I think, is probably to be welcomed here.
Yeah.
There's a sense of humour about the whole thing.
I'm throwing something in from left field here that I hadn't put in the running order, but I thought it might be worthy of your thoughts on this, because I think there's definitely a need for balance on this topic, and it's just slightly, it could be the incendiary device that this programme, suddenly I've taken it down a murky road. What did you make, Hugh, of the police's decision with the Union Bears and the Green Brigade? Because there is a strong feeling that maybe the kettling of these fans away from the game, is too heavy-handed. And then on the flip side of that, if you're not going to be allowed to be searched with flares and various other things that are brought into the game that shouldn't be, then if you're not going to allow that, then you're not getting in.
It seems to be a direct policy now as well. Apparently they did it at the Hearts Hibs game as well. So it seems to be police policy now to do this. And the thing about it is it is stop and search. And you can understand why people say, well, I don't want to be stopped and searched. It's my constitutional rights, and you have to have probable cause. Why you stop and search? And I can get that. But the problem is that I think the clubs are in this. I think the clubs support this. Is that they will look at it from the clubs and police side. They will look at it that these sections of fans come in with dangerous pyro, come in with banners that are not reflective of the club's attitude to things or the club's policy and things. I think, although the name Big McFarlane was never used in one of the banners, I think it was very clear that was a reference to Big McFarlane, who was a convicted killer, and so I think there's been an upping of the stakes. I think there's maybe been a line crossed. I think both clubs are in alignment with, they don't want pyro in the ground. They don't want banners that are not reflective of the club's stated policy, and this stop and search has been used as a mean towards it.
I mean, some people want to challenge it, and they're obviously guiding the various groups. Some more intelligent than the members of the group are driving, what is, in their view, an infringement of their civil liberties.
I'd like to plead the fifth on this. I don't know the legalities behind it. I know Hugh's right, the grievances are valid, and I think there has to be a kind of understanding that football fans aren't treated as equals, and there's a kind of, the Kettling I don't agree with, but what else how do you manage them?
Yeah.
I also think that if you're not prepared to get searched going into a football ground, given the precedent that's been set, why are you not prepared to be searched?
Yeah. The other aspect of this as well, Alison, is quite simply, and this is where you can hit a line of an opinion on something. For example, Celtic fans' persistence in waving the Palestinian flag. I think we've discussed this on the programme before. It is not whether we agree or disagree with the Palestinian flag. It is the fact that Celtic keep getting fined by UEFA because it's a clear breach of the rules. That is where I think, from our point of view, we say, you've got to stop it, not because we have an opinion on whether it's right or wrong, or whether there is the freedom to use a platform, football, whether that's right or wrong, for your political opinions, your religious opinions, your historical opinions on various people or groups. It's the fact that if it breaches UEFA rules, the club pays the penalty.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that's a slightly different argument, but I do understand where you're going for that. But equally, I think you could understand supporters pointing to the hypocrisy then of UEFA and saying, well, during the Ukraine invasion, we were all encouraged and welcome to show support for Ukraine. So you can see the hypocrisy that is there, and you can have a bit of sympathy for it. The other aspect in terms of the club very clearly stating, we do not want pyro. For the pyro thing, I don't know how many times you need to hear it. You've heard it from managers, you've heard it from the club. Quite clearly, it's not going away.
Yeah. That's the link I'm drawing. That's the link I'm drawing, Ali.
It's not going.
If you breach the club's policy, whether it's a Palestinian thing within UEFA's rules, or whether it's pyros, which again get the club into trouble.
I think there's no doubt that the club would have been aware what the policing strategy was on Sunday. It's naive to think that the club were completely in the dark about what was going to happen. And again, I think what you've seen previously too is a breach of trust between certain elements of the support and the board repeatedly, and so this is where it comes. And I think it is heavy-handed. I think you would have to say aspects of the policing. Certainly, I can only go with second-hand accounts. I wasn't there, but what you're hearing, aspects were fairly heavy-handed. I would agree some people might object to saying I don't want to be stopped and searched. However, what you've also seen across recent seasons is a tendency for balaclavas, keeping your face completely covered. I do think that feels quite sinister. Why are you going to a game when you can't show your face? What is it about? What is it that you're doing that you need to be concealing your identity? I also think there's a kind of unsavoury element of then filming the police and putting out details on social media. I think that crosses a line too. The big thing I think that comes out of it is that you need elements of the support, probably Green Brigade for Celtic and the Union Bears with Rangers, to sit down with representatives of the club. There is a civil war that has just bubbled under the surface with Celtic fans and the board for the last 4 or 5 years, and these kind of instances do nothing other than heighten the disparity between the two of them.
Yeah, the other argument, which I think is pretty lame in my mind, and it's not an attack on any individual group. It's just an observation. But to suggest that without the Green Brigade or the Union Bears that there's not going to be an atmosphere at either of these grounds is utterly preposterous.
Aye, although they do contribute a lot to it, I think they're good at leading off stuff. But again, you're right. On a big night or a big afternoon, either Celtic or Ibrox, so there is an atmosphere that, and it goes back decades. It didn't need, sort of an orchestrated group to go in it. I think if you look back in this, it's all incidents. You see an incident, and of course the context, and this has gone on for ages. The thing about the police getting photographed is just a retaliation because the fans, whether they be Union Bears or Green Brigade or just punters, are fed up with getting filmed by police. Entering grounds and police at sections all the time filming you. And that again doesn't seem to be any great end because it's never stopped pyro getting in. I mean, one of the big problems with pyro, and I'm fairly relaxed about pyro.
Went on Sunday.
Still pyro on Sunday.
Are the Rangers fans at the end of the game?
One of the things I'm quite relaxed. I'm not as you think. I mean, because I've been in Argentina and seen how mental it is there. You think you're sitting on top of a bonfire in Argentina, but the thing about it is that football grounds now are really controlled by stewards who are getting minimum wage, right, minimum training, and they're not wanting to go and search people minutely into, and apart from things like health and safety, and you've seen protests about young women getting searched and saying, well, I didn't want it, but they're not wanting to do that anyway. They're getting 12 quid in it. Why do they want to jump in the middle of 10 or 15 people wearing pyro and get into all that? So football, I mean, the thing about it is when you say, well, we'll get the police, we'll take it hand, we'll kettle people, and we'll say to them, if you're not searched minutely, you're not getting in. That will give you less pyro, but it doesn't give you no pyro. It gives you less banners, but it won't give you no banners, because banners will be, and pyro will be inveigled in at other parts of the ground and then carried round. Yeah. So it seems like a big hammer to get to a very small nut, you know.
Alison's point spot on about the hostility historically between the police and football fans generally is something which has been allowed to fester and get out of control. How do you mediate between that? You need sensible people to do it. Really.
Yeah, okay. There's lots of other things that came out of an Old Firm game. Do you give Fergie the job? There's no logic in football. That's all I would say to you, and it's an ongoing thing. Barry Ferguson, after he finished playing, the only thing he wanted was the Rangers job. Mm-hmm. Always wanted to be Rangers manager. Whether he thought he was doing the right thing, thinking I'll do the kind of a Sir Alex Ferguson build up through the lower leagues, is whether it was the right move or not, I don't know. I do think he has qualities. I don't think. I don't agree with some of the criticism of him that he's not a guy who can't coach. I mean, I just don't agree with that. He has his badges, and he's a shrewd cookie. Whether he's good enough to be the Rangers manager and a long-term view on this is determined by other factors, Hugh. A takeover, whether they want him, whether they've got a grand plan. But whatever he's got as a quality, he's managed to get the trick out of a great bunch of failures.
Yeah, but as we said that it's a limited trick. Let's not forget that they've lost to Motherwell under him. They've lost to Fenerbahce under him. But there's certainly been, in terms of body language, in terms of spirit and commitment, there seems to have been a sea change. I'm quite clear in getting the job. No, would be my pretty firm answer on that. And I think if you look at the 49ers group that are taking over this, you would see that their decisions are based on analytics. They won't be based on any kind of emotion. They'll have done their due diligence in Barry and said, well, what's his background? What are his badges? What's his style of play? How is his recruitment? Where does he recruit? I mean, they'll have a short list of who they want to be head coach. I think more pertinently, they'll have a short list of who they want to be sporting director. And if the 49ers, the way they run them, and indeed the way they run Leeds, is any indication, that'll be the key role, because they'll know that head coaches come and go.
And the sporting director will want to appoint.
He'll want to appoint. Well, I actually think, and I think there's always too much media of people knowing the club and and there's been some funny skits about that. I still think there's a role for somebody like Barry Ferguson at Rangers, because I think some clubs are very specific clubs that need to, people need to be reminded about what is on offer here. I mean, I talked to Peter Grant about Barry the other week there, and Peter managed or coached him at Birmingham to a cup final. He was on the radio with them. He's known them over the years, and he's really, he's sharp. He's a good coach. But the most important thing, he says, he knows what it's like to play. And this is a specific thing at Celtic Rangers, how to play for the Celtic Rangers. If you talk to every player that's left Celtic or Rangers and gone to England, they'll tell you the same story. Oh, we drew away at Luton. I came into the dressing room, I was shouting the ball, and everybody was going, we just got to draw away.
Yeah, that's
a cultural thing.
At Rangers and Celtic, you have to win every week, and say it's a crisis. You look at what's happening in the aftermath to Celtic, in the aftermath of Sunday. They're odds-on favourites for a treble. Another treble, right? They've reached the knockout stages of the Champions League. They're hosing in money so fast, it's like the garage in Breaking Bad, right? And then you say, oh, what about that? I don't know if Brendan's, I don't know if this, and I think this Engels is that, and I think this. That's the reality.
Yeah, I mean, the upshot of it all is, and that brought me on to another one of the points that we're talking about, Ferguson's one aspect, but in the broad sense, in the greater context of this, it means nothing. As I said before, I've been to many an Old Firm game and then Rangers 9 in a row where Celtic got that token victory and they thought, they're back. And Rangers went on and won a treble, won a double, won a league. It means nothing.
Does it mean something? It exposes a dressing room that's fraudulent, that delivers when they want to deliver, and it maybe took a different voice, maybe a bit of aggression, a bit of cajoling.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about the Rangers dressing room?
Well, the Rangers dressing room, right, for Celtic's perspective then, it doesn't, it only means bragging rights for a flash. Rangers created history against Fenerbahce. It was a shameful one, 4 consecutive defeats at home. And they did a lap of honour in front of their fans. That can't be forgotten. A dressing room that turns up when it feels stimulated enough to do that is the issue with Rangers. Celtic.
It's shameful. Shameful sounds as if we're all sitting, with the judge's hat on. We're just about to put the black hat over the wig. I mean, shameful. It's a game of football, for God's sake. They were ranked rotten from one manager's voice, and another manager's come in and said, "Right, come on, get your finger out. This is what it's like to play for
That's
Rangers."
the truth of it, and that's exactly what's actually happened.
Shameful, Your Honour.
I know some Rangers fans that would regard it as a disgrace, right? A shame, right?
Yeah.
Celtic missing the guy that makes them fluid was so apparent, and I don't think that Brendan will lose any sleep over it whatsoever. They've got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, I mean that is the ultimate aspect of this. If anything, it gives a lot of Rangers fans, I think, with any of the games, I think as Callum Davidson said when Queen's Park defeated Rangers, is there cause to celebrate? And he said, yeah, celebrate the moment. Enjoy the moment. Sometimes a moment like that can give you hope for the future.
Yeah, are you talking about the qualification, the Fenerbahce?
Well, I'm talking, whether it's a qualification because they have to do enough to get into the next round, or whether that's the wild celebrations of winning a game against your great rivals. Celebrate the moment. I totally buy into that. Callum Davidson, Queen's Park knockout Rangers, historically, let's all go. And Rangers beat Celtic on 2 occasions back to back, Ali. Roll on.
I think you're entitled to enjoy it, you're entitled to celebrate it. Of course, you've not had fans in the ground for so long. I think 5 years since Rangers last won at Celtic Park. Of course, it's what football is about. Those moments are essentially what it's about, particularly for supporters. I do think you can say, hang on a wee minute, if you look at where you are, if that had brought, for example, the league title back to 6 points or something, you can see why. But I think it just shows you that there's been so little to celebrate at Rangers. The fact that there's so much exuberance over the result, the fact that there's been so much celebrating about it, I think it just shows you the fact that it's a club who have been desperately short of any real tangible success. That now you're in the moment.
You can see how Barry's brought that togetherness back, that identity back, that blueness to Rangers. You've gone, the cultural figure that spoke in riddles is gone. It's very brass tacks now, and you can see the whole thing engaging and growing for that.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. I do think. I think obviously he's got a tune out of them. Clearly, I think there's something there, but there are still frailties within that team. I think if you still look at the performances, I think since Barry went in, you would highlight it. Shipped 2 goals to Kilmarnock, and then you come back and win the game, and you get a response. But I think there still have been moments in games where you think that this team is still dreadfully short.
I spoke to Billy Reid during the week and I said, what is it about a dressing room that flip-flops as much as Rangers do? He says, that tells me it's not the manager, it's the personalities within the dressing room. And I think that summed it up perfectly.
Yeah, but I don't get this, short-termism of, analysing, well, they went 2-0 down against Kilmarnock, or he lost to Motherwell, or he had 4 days with them. He'd one day before he hit the Kilmarnock, and then all the frailties that he realised was there. He has a half-time team talk, hooks one of them after half an hour, makes immediate changes, gets a trick out of him in the second half. They'll lose to Motherwell, which is, can happen because he's dealing with a group of players who are frail, who have weaknesses, who have a psychological problem, mentality problem of actually thinking we should be able to go out here and beat Motherwell. And then as he gets on longer than 4 days, he starts to get his message across. Now, whether that's, as Hugh mentioned, whether that's a good long-term message or not that's worthy of him being in the running is the question I put to you, which I haven't yet, is should he be a serious contender?
I would love Barry Ferguson to get the Rangers job. He's a friend of mine, he's a friend of ours. I've dealt with him for years. I helped go write his column for him at the Record. I know him very well. He's a lot smarter than people give him credit for. There's a depth to him. And he does analyse things with a clear head. But Barry's, for me, not a contender. I also think the coaching structure at Rangers now helps him because Neil McCann's the brains behind the operation. Billy Dodge is an astute, clever guy. They're training ground guys. Barry's the voice and the figurehead. And the one that will go in the fans will sing his name and all that. That's a good short-term, temporary measure to make it a feel-good. But you need proper professionals in there that will revamp the place. It needs cleared out and it needs somebody to come in who's got the gravitas and clout and the contact base to go, and if they've got the money and the funds, if it comes to fruition, there's a proper revolution. And Barry, sadly, I don't think he is going to be even in the conversation.
And that brings us basically to where all the problems lie at Rangers, which is something that was highlighted by John Bennett, something that was highlighted by John Gilligan, and something again that Fraser Thornton and Patrick Stewart have highlighted, that it's not the manager, it's the structure, it's all those things that have to build the house that are the problem, rather than somebody who's got the keys of the door to run it.
But I love all that. You see, they all say it's not the manager, and they all sack the manager. I mean, even Patrick Stewart said, at Christmas, he says, it's not the manager, it can't be the manager. We've got big, I think it was his quote, we've got bigger things to sort out here than sorting out the manager. And what happens? The manager goes. Because the manager is the one that becomes, that's football, it becomes untenable and the manager just has to go. But it's a root and branch thing. I think the takeover for them is the best news that Rangers could get.
Do you not think, though, if you look at the Leeds model, they bring in people who have got a breadth, a wide contact base. Neil McCann, Billy Dodds and Barry Ferguson are doing great at steadying the ship, but they don't have that, and Leeds know the value of that. They've look at what they've done. They've gone and brought in diamonds, left. The recruitment's been brilliant. Whoever comes in has to lead that, and I don't think they fit that kind of...
Yeah, only time will tell. And of course, still to get the investment over the line as well. Just on that, obviously I'm going to talk about Callum McGregor and Celtic's obviously tough week, losing a game like that, but in the broader sense, the board looking at how successful they've been this season, the performance in Munich, we'll talk about that in a minute. As ever, sometimes a story just catches your eye and breaking news kicks into a programme, especially like this one today. Rangers have obviously released a statement regarding their charge by UEFA for a banner, and again it goes back to what we were talking about moments before, which is banners that get in, that are unveiled, and you look at it and you think, oh my God, that jars with you, because it's not a reflection of the club, and it's this kind of a rogue element who suddenly start putting out banners which beggar belief, and this has got Rangers in trouble. And obviously they've released a quite long, lengthy statement and said, regards to the banner. Now the banner itself had racist tones to it. I think the one we're all on about, that was paraded in next to the Union Bears. So they've reacted to that with a long statement. I'll try and get it as quickly as possible without missing any of the key points, but there's no doubt about Rangers basically distancing themselves from it. It's embarrassing the club, and we're now set to face significant sanctions for the actions of a very small minority, obviously, who held the banner up. The club's been charged by UEFA for the racist and or discriminatory banner at last Thursday's Ibrox meeting with Fenerbahce. They've highlighted the fact that they are progressive, diverse, and getting charged with this is shameful, and the disdain for those responsible is shared by the overwhelming majority of the supporters. It has consequences for the club, and of course, we all know what the consequences are, which is quite simply, there'll be restricted in getting fans to games, and that's the first immediate one. Further, the club has been charged by UEFA for throwing of objects at the home match with Fenerbahce as well. It's a regular occurrence, not just at Rangers matches, but across stadia in Scotland, and our players and staff were targeted with missiles as well at Parkhead on Sunday. Focusing on Ibrox, however, a widely reported incident in January's Old Firm game whilst at a recent game with Motherwell, one of our supporters was hit and injured by an object thrown towards the away end, and now the club faces a sanction for the actions of an individual last Thursday night. So again, the club's going to face UEFA sanctions for the blocking of passageways at the Fenerbahce match. Supporters are urged to follow the advice of stewards and the police at all times. And lastly, and despite clear warnings to the contrary, pyrotechnics were used by 2 individuals following Sunday's Old Firm game at Parkhead, and that runs the risk of an additional 800 of our supporters being unable to attend a match in the latter stages of the Premier Sports Cup at Hampden, in addition to the 500 that will already miss out as a result of the use of pyrotechnics. And it goes on to say all of the above behaviours have consequences for the club, directly or indirectly to the club's supporters as well. And it's calling on all reasonable supporters to wholeheartedly reject any behaviour which brings the name of Rangers into disrepute, and to also assist the club by challenging any issues which will lead to them being punished further by the relevant authorities. The banner was distasteful, to say the least.
The undertones that it carried are problematic.
Yes, absolutely. And again, it's like some fans, who are thugs, whether it's a banner or whether it's they go into a ground and smash the chairs up, don't realise that their club gets charged for the chairs.
I don't know what else clubs can do. I don't know how much more you come out and say, like, we're getting fined, you're besmirching our reputation repeatedly. I think it will have to come to not being allowed fans access to grounds. The message does not go through at all on any level.
I think the police action at the weekend and the Hibs Hearts game is part of this. As part of a crackdown on this behaviour, sanctioned and agreed to by the clubs themselves.
But you can understand it here.
That's what I'm saying. You go. I can understand the other side of sports saying, I don't want to be stopped and searched. I'm not a criminal. But if you look at what the clubs have got to do now, and Rangers have got to do now in this specific instance, you're talking about allocations for cup finals being reduced. It's
because you're on a suspended sentence from everything that's already happened.
You're getting, for us to get in, you have to show that you're not. That's just the way the world is now.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting with Rangers though, because culturally, right, Rangers have been trying to progress, and they had the rainbow flag up, they had the Easter celebrations this week.
Yeah.
And there has been pushback to that. There has been amongst a section of the support. But if this takeover goes through, the 49ers group will not entertain any pushback on that.
Here's the point.
They will just not. They will say, this is the way we do it. We're an inclusive club. This is what we're doing. If you don't fancy it, you're not getting a ticket.
Well, it's interesting, and that release there says, for the avoidance of doubt, if you do not believe in 2025 that absolutely everyone is welcome to follow Rangers, whether at Ibrox or away, then Rangers is not the club for you, and you should disassociate yourself with the club immediately.
That's incredible. That's one of the strongest statements that I think you've had.
Do you not think there's a fear there that if you're investing into Rangers and you then do your investigating and you see the baggage that currently exists, could that deter the investment?
I think there's no.
Would you want to associate yourself with certain fringes within the club which exists in its reality?
If you're smart enough about it, it's a clear business sense where they will draw a line and say, okay, we understand there is an underhand, element here who breach the code of conduct, but this is a business. Business people tend to look at it in the cold light of day and say, what is our objective? Why are we doing it? how much is it costing us, what will we get out of it at the end, and if we have to deal with these people further down the line, we'll deal with it.
We'll deal with it because it's a brand. These people, the 49ers people are dealing with big people in the outside world.
Do you think it will have an effect?
I think once I think that is a hugely strong statement, and I think I might be unfair to Patrick Stewart, but I would imagine it's been prompted by the not just the perceived danger to a takeover, because I don't think that I might have little concerns, but it's obviously it's linked to the people in America don't want anything to do with that kind of stuff. It will be expunged. We're coming in. We're going to spend, some say up to £100 million buying this club.
Wishful thinking, not that kind of. You can't expunge what exists.
I think if you go draconian, you just might. Another thing as well is the more and more that you go to open this, a lot of people will fall away from that. A lot of people will say, this isn't, the club that I once supported, so I'm not supporting it anymore.
Yeah, well, listen, it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that, how the ongoing, narrative continues to try and get these people out of the grounds, and whether they buy into it, and whether indeed the investors decide to make the move forward in the summer, or even closer if you read some of the reports and believe them. With regards to the Celtic end of it, all the hullabaloo you mentioned was about McGregor. We've already established that for them, I think the Celtic will look at it and say it's a treble year. It's one of the best performances I've seen in Europe against Munich. But suddenly, a game like this, raises those ugly questions. You couldn't change the outcome of the game, Brendan, because you didn't have your star striker, because you sold him in the January transfer window. But in the broad scheme of things, from a board's perspective, does it matter? The answer is emphatically no. They've banked more money. They'll have one of the most impressive sets of financial figures coming out by the time they get to the summer. And yet again with Celtic, which I think, I don't know if you picked it up on the last 24 hours, whether they go for another player sale or not, they could have an add-on from the Jeremy Frimpong deal, which will bring them a substantial amount of money. So it just keeps on rolling in. So as a board who's prudent, they're making fortunes.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that Celtic are very well run in a business sense, that they're very good at recycling players, investing elements into the first team. You've seen it across the last 20 years. There's an argument to say there isn't another club in Britain who's been so successful at that kind of strategy. In terms of the Kyogo thing, I was surprised. We spoke about it at the time. I was so sure when Brendan Rodgers spoke, I think it was at Fir Park, that there was another striker in the wings. I did think it was possibly remiss to let Kyogo go when there wasn't another one. I do think it's hard to keep a player who wants to go, and it was very clear that he wanted to go, and he'd wanted to go from the summer, and that's no accusation about his professionalism or anything, because I think he gave his all in the time that he was at the club, but I think he did make it very clear he wanted to go. Obviously hasn't worked out as well for him as he thought it would since. He's had a really torrid time at Rennes, but yeah, I think Celtic are short in that department. I think they were light defensively too. When you see a couple of injuries and then you look at the bench, there's very, very little on the bench and on Sunday when you think about it.
I think it was telling though that Brendan's actually hinted at his disdain for the recruitment structure and the transfer window and the way it was handled, and they're going to investigate the reasons why they didn't do that. And that will be the catalyst for something else moving forward.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's something we've spoken about often.
Why do you need to investigate? It's just a recurring theme. I don't need to investigate. I just know. What investigation do you need?
So, if you're going to sell your real guy that does things that other people don't, your difference maker, guy that especially in old firm games, and if you don't have the backup to come in without, you talk about the balance sheets, that matters not a jot. Do they need a Kyogo figure at the moment? They don't. They'll win the league.
No, absolutely. That's my point. That's the defence of it. That's the ultimate
tell
defence.
That to Celtic fans. Is it a lack of professionalism? Is it a mistake that they've made? I think it is.
Yeah, well, it absolutely is. I've spoken to a Rangers fan, Hugh, who said, Ida's coming on, so what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the big problem at Celtic at the moment is there's no recruitment strategy.
That's exactly.
There's not a strategy.
Isn't that astounding when Alison says they're probably the best club in Britain for recycling
Yeah,
players?
But that was the recruitment strategy under Mark Lowell, much derided and lampooned, was at least a strategy, right? And not only was a strategy, it brought players through, and even the players that it didn't bring through get sold, right? So it was a strategy. So what is the strategy now? I do not know, because in the transfer window, what were you trying to do in the January transfer window? You're trying to offload your striker that wasn't happy being there. You come to an agreement with him, listen, okay, we're going to let you go. You think you'd have somebody in the door before the guy gets out, but even in a basic negotiation tactic that if you're negotiating with a Scandinavian club for the striker and they suddenly seen that you've sold your striker for 10 million, that adds a ka-ching to what they're wanting from you, and they know that you are desperate.
Yeah.
So I don't see the strategy. The only strategy you could think of is like Brendan Rodgers doesn't want to buy little gems that he's got to polish. That's a fact. You can see what he does with little gems that need to be polished when they're in the door. Brendan Rodgers wants to buy Premier League players that he knows have been at the top level and have done it. How do I know that? Because that's who he's bought.
Yeah.
And that's that. But that is not a strategy going forward, Peter.
I agree with.
Sorry, it'll be interesting to see what your take up on Saturday is when you go and watch the Scotland under-17s, because then you'll see, I believe, a poverty of player there. Right? There's no. Another thing is, there's nobody there coming pushing. Nobody.
Yeah, I agree with you on Brendan Rodgers. He's keeping a tight lip on it, but he's not happy with the structure. It's something that was there before. It's back there again, and he's when we're on the verge of a treble, he's basically just keeping the gunpowder dry. But one thing to his credit, for the 11 that he did have available that were strong in Munich, he delivered the knockout game. Could have delivered even more had he had even more backup that he wanted in the summer, but he produced one of the best performances of a Celtic side in decades in Europe away from home.
Here's a devil's advocate approach to that whole thing. When the Brendan Rodgers boredom factor kicks in again, and his ego requires something else, was this the glass ceiling season for him?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that at the moment, partly, if only for the reason that Alison's wondering how long my bar from Celtic is going to last. That's another programme. That's another programme so far down the line it defies belief, because the one thing they don't like is the truth. We'll crack on. Just one little footnote to that. Is one of the Rangers fans got a tattoo, Hugh, on his backside of Raskin, because he said he was going to his mates get a tattoo of Raskin on his backside if they won the game, and he scored, so he's got Raskin on his backside. I just wonder, thank God it wasn't Jan Vennegoor of Hesseling, because there's too many O's, for
there are some people
right
who just shouldn't drink on your head.
Yeah, that's exactly. There you are. There speaks the voice of reason, Ali. Don't
To get a tattoo or something.
Exactly. There are mad people that do these sort of things. And then the other one is they get a tattoo of the face of somebody who's their hero, and it looks nothing like them.
One of the Chuckle brothers.
Yes, or Boris Karloff. Look up Boris Karloff if you're under a certain age. Anyway, just a couple of things that I think are well worthy of our comment. We talked about fans. The negative aspect of it is one thing. Fleecing them is another thing which angers me a lot, Hugh. And, reading the Edinburgh Evening News, there's a fair few of them are angry at Hearts because the ticket price is £78 for the ticket for the semi-final. Now,
That's with transport.
Well, Hugh, come on. In that end where they're going, it's £30 normally for a ticket. Yeah. It's 78, and Heart's answer to it all is, well, that additional £48 for the bus is transport is really expensive, and of course you're getting really near the stadium. I mean, for God's sake, Hugh, you can get through from Edinburgh to Glasgow for £1.
Well, do it then. I mean, this is
£48 more. Hugh.
Don't pay it.
£78.
How do you get through from Edinburgh to Glasgow for £1?
On that mega
You're on the
bus.
megabus.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Well, you would know because what you do is you cadge a lift off every
take
journalist you've
buses.
ever met. Yeah.
Buses.
See, the wider point of here is I think I get a bit tired of this. It's a country, whenever there's a cup final, when there's people say, everybody in Scotland that has the power to vote votes for a political party that supports capitalism, right? And the only time that they have any problem with capitalism is when football clubs use capitalism, right? And there's this feeling, and I don't know what it was, but I was talking about this other day that in the old days, football clubs had more time for the fans in the old days in the solo game. Yeah. Football clubs have always fleeced the fans.
That doesn't make it right, Hugh. And
I'm not saying it's make it right.
You're talking
I'm
about
just
football
saying,
fans. The fans were up in arms in the last 3 months about Oasis because basically Oasis fans are being fleeced because all of a sudden, once it hits Ticketmaster, you're being asked to pay exorbitant sums on an upward scale. Just because of the demand.
But that's capitalism, and that's what it's all about. And the key thing for there was asked to pay. You don't have to pay it.
Hugh, hang on a minute. I'm
Come
looking
on,
at the
Hugh.
figure.
You don't.
Kids want to go and see the
Yeah,
Scramblers in a
kids
semi-final.
want to go to. I want to go to Barbados on Tuesday.
Yeah.
See, if you're in a dangerous path, if you're making football for the common man an unaffordable experience.
But that's
and that's
what
the
they're
problem
doing.
with that figure.
And that's
if you
what
get
they
a
want
family,
to do.
you get a couple of kids, and you're taking through.
They don't
It's
care.
beyond your reach.
I'm not too sure there's too many people who are we were talking about the common man now. The football stadium is built to accommodate the middle class person. But I still think whether you're middle class, upper class, whether you're loaded or whether you're not, there has to be some kind of intervention to say, come on, put a cap on this.
Is it just me? I think £78 again. You're not going yourself. You're taking other members of the family, probably. That's going to put it out of reach for some of them. I think
some of them, it's quite a lot of them are looking, going, you take special occasions where you and your son Ali, go, and it's a couple of grand because you know exactly the experience. But these are one-offs
for a Scottish game at all.
Aye.
You would?
Would you?
I would put something
Which game would you pay that kind of money for?
I paid £60 plus for Champions League.
Scottish domestic game.
A cup final, I'd paid £78.
Yeah.
I paid £430 for a cup final.
Yeah, Champions League though.
But that's a connoisseur's event, right?
And I'm not trying to be proud. I know this is going to affect people, but it's this thing that people just we seem to talk about this all the time. People can't say this is football. Football isn't communism. It's not social.
You've lost your soul.
No,
I
I
think of the parent in Edinburgh that's saying to their son, "Dad, are we going to the game?" He just can't afford it.
Exactly, that's what's going to.
He wants to go.
And they can't afford it.
The tickets are actually still affordable. We're about 30 quid a ticket.
No, but the point here,
That's what it is.
It's a bus.
30 quid,
Just
ticket.
don't get the bus. Go yourself.
The point here is, Hugh,
That's a bargain.
it is capitalism, but you don't need to suck it up. You need to actually put a lid on it. You need to.
But the thing about capitalism never puts a lid on anything.
No, I know, but what we've got is a group or an organisation who can say, listen, any chance you could intervene here and try and show your supporters a wee bit of.
That's what will stick in the mouth of supporters is that our club is milking us for all it's worth. But that is
Changed by what's happened to you.
Yeah.
No, I just see the reality of it. I just see all my
You
life.
moved from the Herald to the Daily Mail. Why are you criticising them?
But see,
Listen, would you mind shopping places with me?
I tell you what, I moved from. I've watched football in 8 different decades. 8 different decades of it, and the people at the top have remained the same. And in fact, football now is much better to watch than it was in the old days. And people say, why? I says, because I stood up to my shock and effluent in stadiums that were proved to be in danger of killing me.
Yeah.
I went to stadiums where people died and nobody gave a toss. So this thing about the old soul of football, give us peace. Football's always been run for money from people at the top. It continues to be run for money for people at the top. because that's just the way the world is.
Absolutely, but every now and then we like people from the top to maybe do a bit of soul searching, and maybe somebody to intervene. If there is a modicum of decency somewhere, maybe it's just pie in the sky. But I feel for the Jambos. I know a lot of Jambos, a lot of friends, and 78 quid's a lot of money for it. Just a couple of things before I want to try and get it in. I don't want to be dismissive on it in a small scale, but it is a complex one, and I feel the next few minutes doesn't do it enough service. But we could lose one of the clubs that's not that old, as far as their history in Inverness, Thistle, and how they all came about. But they're on the verge of liquidation, and unless somebody comes in and saves them, there is a club we're going to lose that's got a history of winning the Scottish Cup, and also a community that's going to lose a club because they are mired in some people's self-interest, some people digging their heels in with regards to monies owed, and I'm not saying rightly or wrongly, and of course the surrounding area around the Tulloch Stadium, where people just don't know, eventually who's owning it, how they're going to get out of obligations that they have to shareholders who are people who've worked on the board at some point as directors. It is messy. And for guys like Alan Savage, who's put in £1 million of his own money, he's said enough is enough. And when he says that, there's nobody else at the door saying they want to help Inverness out.
I think they're in serious trouble. I think you would have to look at it and fear the worst for them as a club. I think, I think there are all manner of issues around it, and how you get out of it. I think. I don't think it looks good for Inverness at all.
Yeah, it needs somebody or a group of people to help. Now, I know Alan Savage has suggested, look, maybe we if we can get the Highland and Islands, council to help them move to a smaller stadium, that might help. I think he was trying to do that to try and get them out of the clutches of what's, the nettles that are around the Tulloch Stadium.
That hurts them long term, hurts them massively. And I would hate to see that. It's a beautiful surrounding, the Tulloch Bridge and all that. It's, as you say, it's a club with history.
Yeah.
Alison's right, if there's no money, there's no money. But this is a club that's been mismanaged. The chief exec,
grossly mismanaged.
And you're right, the surrounding areas. Sometimes clubs just run out of money and there's no willing to do anything. Alan Savage has got to the nth degree with them and been brilliant. I think you're right. I think he's using that as leverage because all they have is a stadium. All they have is a stadium, really. Yeah,
and there's a number of people that, will quite simply, are digging their heels in. Whether they are digging their heels in because of the way they think they were treated is another matter. But it's not just a simple situation where somebody comes in and thinks, I'm coming in to buy, to buy the car. The engine's owned by somebody. The steering wheel's owned by somebody else. There's a loan on, some of the wheels. That's how complex that deal is.
I think Alan Savage has been clever though, because he's taken it to a point now where there's ultimatums and people will have to give a wee bit if they want to get, because effectively if the whole thing goes to pot, nobody gets anything.
I think he's right to give an ultimatum. He's put £1 million of his own money in.
And he's put in a lot of money in the past as well. And in all this, we know about football, there's always a danger of saying of people he's an honourable man, because the way Savage has behaved in this has been great honour and dignity and philanthropy, because he's literally getting done out by a very severe headache, because it's heading one way. I think that the leeway is, I think Gordon's put his finger on it. Liquidation, nobody gets anything.
You don't think he's been great as a figurehead as well? Because the dignity that you talk about, the club has been dragged through it, and he's been the one polished figure.
Well, Charlie Christie as well has been very strong in it, and Charlie Christie is rightly well respected up there. He's been the guy that's worked in almost every capacity of the job. But now it's come to a breaking point now, and I think the only way out of it is, I've heard it's £3 million they owe.
3.5 or something.
So that's, it has well been 3 trillion, so the only way out of it will be if debtors can come to an agreement long term. Otherwise you go into liquidation and there's a potential for them to get very, very little out of it, and then if you go into liquidation it becomes an asset sale, and then once it's an asset sale, what happens to the club?
couple of things before we finish. Want to mention Newcastle winning the cup. It was absolutely fantastic. You know, you get Anton Deck, you've got Alan Shearer, you've probably got Lindisfarne. I'm trying to think of you get Gaza. You've probably got everybody.
Jimmy Neal.
Jimmy Neal, great shout.
Crocodile shoes.
Yeah, can you think of other famous people
Who
from
was the guy that
Newcastle?
fished? Robson Green.
What is he? Geordie?
Geordie.
Yeah. Yep. I'm thinking of famous. Was Alan Price not a famous Geordie?
Oh, he was.
Yeah.
The rising sun.
I'm thinking of famous Geordies, Ali, that basically will be absolutely still at this moment, pie-eyed, drunk, celebrating, and what a great time for that city. I always remember, and we've said it all of us countless times, whoever delivers the first piece of domestic silverware for them is a god forever.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they were well worth it as well. I thought Liverpool were really poor on Sunday, but I think just an extraordinary moment to be there and to celebrate it. And you can only imagine what it's like to go that length of time without ever seeing your team win a trophy.
It's
and
amazing. She was talking about capitalism in football, right? That's what's taken them to where they are, right? Now, freedom of city and all that, right?
What talk about
If this soulless individuals, he was probably cheering on Newcastle, weren't he?
Well, do you know, see the Newcastle boys? The Newcastle boys were probably sitting there saying, you know, and this is definitely for that area, which I applaud because I've come from a type of family like this. You know, the boys probably said to his dad, it's going to cost us a hell of a lot to get there, and we might be paying it off, you know, well into next, you know, to December. And he'd look at his boy and go, you know what? Let's go. Let's go.
It was
Absolutely.
like in Qatar. I was talking to a couple of Argentine fans in Qatar, and both had sold their cars to go to so they didn't really know what they were going to do when they went back home. But at that moment in time, they weren't really that bothered. I mean, that is the power. That is the power of football. I just think the interesting thing about the always strikes to me is the two elements to the Newcastle thing. That one city, one club town or one club city. I think it's a brilliant thing. Yeah. You know, if you go to a city and it's just got one club, I think that's really good, as well as the rivals and other clubs.
And you know the funny thing, on the flip side of that, if you had turned round to your son Ali and said, look Ali, I know we are big Borussia Dortmund fans, I'm only talking about your previous car, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sell the car so that we can go and see Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League final. And he goes, well Dad, we're in Stirling, so that gets us to Glasgow. How are we going to get to London if we sell your car? You know?
We got me to Glasgow on my bus pass rather than what I got for the car. That last car, actually, that last car, tell you a true story about that last car. I took it into its MOT, and I always take it to the same guy, and the guy always says, just fix it. I like the guy, I trust him. Fix it and give me a phone. He says, to fix this car's going to cost over 500 quid. I said, Jimmy, just do it. I told you that. He says, the car's not worth 500 quid.
Or his classic line, Parsley, when I said to him, Hugh, I've been in this car, which is like a bomb site, and I went in the car and I said, Hugh, that engine light has been on for quite a number of months now. And he went, yeah, I've been meaning to get a Sharpie to colour it out.
Well, you'll know a former Daily Record racing editor went to Cheltenham, won a fortune, and bought a car at Cheltenham to drive home. And funny enough, Newcastle. He stopped at Newcastle and lost it in a game of cards.
These
Never
are
even made it back to Glasgow.
these are just stories and evidence why you should never gamble. Of course, just one little footnote, and I want to mention it before we finish. Alan Hansen picks up an MBE, 69 years of age. You know, in the broad scheme of things, the MBE, nice for Alan Hansen, delighted with it. Not really going to be the top of his medal scale because he's got 3 European Cups, 8 league titles, 2 FA Cups, and 3 League Cups in 620 appearances for Liverpool. What a legend he was.
Yeah, no doubt of his impact at Liverpool and for Scotland too. I think, you know, just when you look back at some of the performances, if you ever go back onto YouTube and watch some of the old footage, just extraordinary what a talent he was.
Yeah, only in our company and only in our country, Parsley, could we find it in the last 50 years we're not able to accommodate a Rolls Royce in the team. Is that fair?
It is fair, and he's one of those people, if you've met him and fortunate enough to have the chance to sit down with him, you're in the company of greatness. He's got that kind of quality about him.
Ran a Liverpool dressing room with Dalglish and Souness, ran it. The other thing, scouted for Liverpool by Jock Steen. Bob Paisley phoned him up and says, I'm looking for a centre half, and then Jock Steen's a boy at Partick Thistle who says, sign him, he'll be great for you. I don't know if he'd be great for us because our game's maybe a wee bit too physical for him at the moment, particularly at the moment, but he'll be great for you because I know you want to play out for the back, and he'll pass out for the back. So Paisley didn't even watch him. Paisley got him.
Was it Alan Hallison that collided with William? He should get taken off him for that alone.
Yeah, let's not. Only Parksy could name drop in 1 minute and then throw a grenade and slaughter him in the same sentence.
Don't you look at me?
Here's
the behaviour today.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, Alan Hansen for me, absolutely world class. Great to see him picking up the honour. He's absolutely delighted about it. But the memories that he's given the Kop and so many of those Liverpool fans, he is etched in their history forever. One of the greats. Okay, I've thoroughly enjoyed today's programme. It's been at times delving into areas which are obviously problematic and bring again kind of tarnish football, and then there are other positives that we've talked about as well, and that's what the Journos is all about. So great to have the company of Hugh McDonald as ever, Gordon Parks and Alison McConnell especially, because today Alison's delighted because we haven't done a top 5 or a top 10, but we'll sneak it into next week's programme. From myself, Peter Martin, to you, thank you for downloading the podcast, listening to the programme, and thank you for watching it too.